Welcome to Science for the Non-Scientist. Today, I'm going to talk about why it is that kids seem to get less sick than adults do with COVID-19. I'll start with talking about how our immune systems fight viruses in general, and then talk about some really cool new research showing that some people who've never had COVID-19 still seem to have antibodies that can work against the virus that causes COVID-19. Now, just to review, COVID-19 is the disease that's caused by this virus, SARS-CoV-2, and this virus is one of a group of viruses called coronaviruses. Coronaviruses are actually pretty common in the human population. For example, these 4 strains of the coronavirus cause the common cold that many of us get every year. There are some coronaviruses, such as the ones that cause MERS, SARS, or COVID-19, that are much more dangerous to humans. These coronaviruses, however, result in a pretty mild infection. So when a virus attacks our body or invades our body, our immune system knows that it should not be there, all right? So as soon as the virus is inside of our body, our cells secrete chemicals that basically tell the immune system, we're being attacked, help. And the immune system comes in and works as a team to kill the virus. Now, importantly, at the end of the day, our body has made antibodies against the virus so that in the future, if this virus were to get inside of our bodies, we wouldn't get sick or we wouldn't have as severe of an illness. Now, these antibodies that our bodies make against this coronavirus are made against the spike protein of the coronavirus. Here shown in red, and an electron micrograph, you can actually see them sticking out from the virus. Now, these spike proteins are really important because that's what the virus uses to stick to our cells and to then get inside of our cells. So what our body does is it makes these antibodies that stick to the spike proteins of the coronavirus. And it basically coats it in these antibodies so that the virus can't attach to our cells and then cannot get into our cells. Now, this research done by scientists from the UK and Wales has found that some people who've never had COVID-19 can actually have antibodies inside of them that work against SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID-19. This research was published in Science very recently, December 2020. So let's look at their data. These researchers looked at a number of individual patients over a number of age ranges, and what they found is that a lot of these individuals, had antibodies inside of them that could react against SARS-CoV-2. And so you can see that the prevalence of these antibodies are different at different ages. Now, how can these antibodies from a different virus protect against SARS-CoV-2 because they've never had SARS-CoV-2 before? Well, antibodies are very specific. All right, so let's say this is a virus, and these are some proteins found on the outside of the virus. So there are only specific antibodies that can attach to this green protein, other antibodies that work only against this red protein, and then other antibodies, let's say, that will work only against this yellow protein. So what this means is, for example, if you get measles and then have antibodies against it, or if you get vaccinated with the measles vaccine, all right, and then have measles antibodies, those antibodies won't work against other viruses like chickenpox, influenza, or hepatitis. Same thing goes with coronaviruses. If you get a common cold here with this coronavirus, and your body makes these orange antibodies, let's say, against the spike protein of this coronavirus, all right, those are going to be different than the antibodies your body will make against the spike proteins of the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus. However, here's the thing. These spike proteins are similar enough that it's possible that the antibodies that your body made when it got the common cold will actually work against the spike proteins of the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus, meaning that would actually be able to protect you against the SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus. Now, these antibodies, which are called cross-reactive antibodies, meaning that they were made against one virus but can protect against another kind of virus, vary across the age ranges. So you can see that the prevalence is highest in children and adolescents, up to 65%, but pretty low in adults. And so across all of the adults they studied in this group and then in other groups they talk about, the prevalence of these antibodies was only 5.3%, meaning that only 5.3% of adults had antibodies in their system that would protect them should they get SARS-CoV-2. And the important thing is that the antibodies that the researchers found in these people that had never had COVID-19 in a laboratory worked against the SARS-CoV-2 virus, meaning that if these individuals were to get COVID-19 or were to get the SARS-CoV-2 virus in them, it seems like these antibodies they already had would work. Now, it's important to realize that just because you get a common cold doesn't mean automatically that you'll have antibodies that can work against SARS-CoV-2. So in this data set, they looked at 13 adults who had had a recent cold, and out of those 13 adults, only one person had the right kind of antibody that would protect them against SARS-CoV-2. So only one person would theoretically be protected from getting COVID-19. Why is this? Well, people have hypothesized it's maybe that kids have more of these antibodies because they get colds more often, and that's why the prevalence of these antibodies are much higher in them than in adults. Or maybe something's different about their immune system, and that's why the antibodies that they make against the common cold coronaviruses can work against SARS-CoV-2 as well. Well, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining me, and please subscribe.